The billionaire opens the safe to test the maid. What she did next broke him. This is a test. A test forged in ruthlessness, calculated with chilling precision, and wrapped in a cloak of absolute silence. The silence inside the Blackwood estate isn't the kind that settles naturally. No, this silence is engineered, curated, and meticulously maintained, like everything else in the life of the man who owns it. Even the air obeys an unspoken law. Here, every sound, no matter how faint, is an intruder. The only permitted noise is the nearly imperceptible ticking of the old Howard Miller clock in the Grand Hall, a mechanical heartbeat for a man whose own heart no longer feels. Beneath a baccarat chandelier worth more than most homes, its fractured light glittering like a galaxy trapped in crystal, there's a disturbance. Single note out of tune in a symphony of order. The oak door to the study stands ajar, and within it, the Leclerc safe, a fortress of steel and titanium, sits open, exposed. The scene has been arranged like a still-life portrait of temptation. Neatly stacked bundles of $100 bills, so fresh they still smell of ink. Bars of gold, raw chains, and uncut diamonds rest beside them, lifeless lights with the power to awaken the most primal corners of human nature. Damian Blackwood knows she'll pass this way. Her schedule is etched, deeper into his mind than the combination of the very safe she'll walk by. At 8:42 a.m. every Wednesday, she enters his study to dust. Hidden within the mahogany archway, where shadows are thick and soft like velvet, he watches. His gray eyes, usually sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, are narrowed now. This is not the gaze of anger. This is the calm of a scientist watching an experiment unfold, fully expecting the outcome. He isn't waiting for greed. He's waiting for confirmation. Confirmation of a truth so deeply rooted in him it has become doctrine. Everyone has a price. No exceptions. Damian Blackwood is an architect, but his greatest creation isn't the Blackwood Tower that pierces the Manhattan skyline. It's the walls, the visible ones, made of steel and concrete, built to protect wealth, and the invisible ones, fortified by betrayal, sealed with suspicion, colder and smoother than marble, built to cage his heart. That structure didn't rise on its own. Its foundation was laid by his father, Victor Blackwood, a self-made magnate with calloused hands and a philosophy more brutal than any winter. He remembers it clearly. Damian was 10. He'd spent the summer with Mr. Gable, the kind gardener, who taught him how to smell the rain in soil and recognize the chirps of sparrows. One afternoon, while helping trim orchids, Damian accidentally snapped the stem of a rare Paphiopedilum, Victor's pride. Mr. Gable took the blame. That evening, Victor summoned Damian to the study. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. His calm was more terrifying than fury. Lighting a cigar, he exhaled a cloud of gray and said flatly, "Gable has been dismissed, but it was my fault," Damian cried, his voice cracking with guilt. Victor looked at his son, not like a father, but like a strategist eyeing a weak piece on a chessboard. Fault is irrelevant. His loyalty made him weak. He was willing to sacrifice himself for your mistake. In this world, sacrifice is currency for fools. He took a long drag. Remember this, Damian. Loyalty expires. Love is an illusion. Only interest endures. Never trust anyone but yourself, because in the end, they will all let you down. That lesson became a curse. Years later, it was cemented by his marriage to Serena Vance. Serena, with her honey blonde hair and a smile that could melt glaciers, Damian had believed that smile. He believed the whispers in the dark, the secrets he shared, the intimacy they built, the truth shattered on a rainy night in the Hamptons. He came home early, hoping to surprise her. He heard laughter, hers, from the library. It was real, joyful, but not for him. "Yes, Marcus," she said on the phone, giggling. "Damian's so naive. He believes everything I tell him. I've got the full Asia expansion plan right here." Marcus, his fiercest rival. Damian stood frozen behind the door, listening as the woman he loved sold him out. Not for money, no, worse, for the thrill of the game. The divorce that followed wasn't just legal warfare. It was a dissection, a public autopsy of his most private truths, spilled across tabloids. Serena took half his fortune. But what she truly stole was the last piece of innocent belief he had left. That final wall was built. Since then, Damian Blackwood hasn't lived. He's fortified. His world became a sterilized fortress, scrubbed clean of emotion. This mansion isn't a home. It's a mausoleum for a life that might have been. He dines alone at a table for 20. He swims laps in an infinity pool overlooking the glittering city, yet all he sees is a vast, cold ocean of isolation. Then, 7 months ago, Elena Morales appeared. She was an anomaly. A glitch in the matrix of control. Her application arrived by chance. Her background, once investigated, was suspiciously clean. Age, 32, widow, husband, deceased in an accident, 2 young daughters, Sophia and Luna. A mother fighting cancer in a public hospital, no criminal record. No debt, no red flags. Through the security cameras, which he monitored like a god over his private universe, he watched her. She moved through the estate with reverence. She dusted statues like performing a ritual. She never lingered, never pried, never flattered. In Damian's world, where everyone had an angle, Elena's purity wasn't a virtue. It was a cover. A disguise, far too perfect to be real. Her presence disturbed him. She challenged the very foundation of his worldview. And so, the test was designed, not to uncover truth, but to confirm the lie he had chosen to believe. It wasn't impulsive. It was meticulous. The night before, he sat in the study, architectural blueprints spread across the table. He calculated every second. He knew the security patrol left the West Wing at 8:40 and wouldn't return until 8:50. He personally called Arthur Finch, the longtime head of security, an ex-Marine who had served the Blackwood family since Victor's time, and told him to take the morning off for a fictitious server maintenance check. "Everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" Arthur asked, concern laced with loyalty. "Everything's under control," Damian replied smoothly. "Just a minor upgrade." Later, he disabled the hallway cameras himself, except for one. A micro device hidden inside the spine of an old edition of Leviathan on the bookshelf across from the safe. A single, secret eye. Only he knew it was watching. At dawn, while the city still slept, Damian entered the study. He opened the safe, felt the steel against his fingertips. He arranged the bills, placed the gold and diamonds with surgical precision. He was setting a stage for a play where he was both director and sole audience. Now he stands in shadow, beneath the arch of dark wood. He hears the faint rumble of wheels, Elena's supply cart approaching. Its rhythm against the marble sounds like fate counting down. In his chest, there is no thrill, no fear, only the cold certainty that he is about to witness what he's always known to be true. Beneath dignity, beneath silence, lurks the beast called desire, and his father's voice, bitter and merciless, echoes once more. "They'll all disappoint you. The trap is set, and the prey is near." Will Elena become just another casualty in the game of suspicion, or will she be the one who rewrites Damian Blackwood's fate? Take a breath. If you're still with us, like this video. Subscribe to Dramatic Stories and stay tuned as the darkness deepens in our next chapter. In another world, one far removed from the marble walls of the Blackwood estate, separated not just by distance but by an entire social stratum, Elena Morales' day begins not with sunlight streaming through the window, but with a cough. Dry, broken cough from the room next door, where her mother Isabella lies in bed. It's her daily alarm clock, a quiet summons, a constant reminder of the invisible battles Elena must face every single day. Their apartment is on the 4th floor of a weathered red brick walk-up in Queens. The building has borne witness to decades of immigrant dreams, some fulfilled, many not. Here, the air doesn't carry the fresh scent of lilies placed daily in baccarat crystal, but the musty breath of old walls mixed with the faint aroma of herbal medicine simmering in the tiny kitchen. Elena's world is not curated silence. It's filled with the raw noise of life, The honking of cars from the street below, the muffled conversations of neighbors, thinly veiled by crumbling plaster walls, the whispers of her daughters, Sophia and Luna, as they stir beneath a threadbare blanket on the floor. She moves carefully, quietly, with the practiced precision of someone who has lived too long on the edge of sleep and survival. Sophia, 8, has her father's deep, contemplative eyes. Luna, 6, carries a smile so radiant it could light the darkest corners of their modest home. They are her reason for rising, and the reason for the deepening lines at the corners of her eyes. Breakfast is reheated rice with 1 egg, split into 3 portions. Elena eats quickly, just enough to keep going, saving most for her daughters. She packs their lunch into 2 small containers. Leftover rice, a few bits of vegetable, and a single apple she debated buying last night at the corner store. Sophia, she says gently but with firm resolve, look after Luna and remind Grandma to take her medicine at 10, okay? I'll be home right after school ends. Elena's burdens can't be measured in her bank account. That account is almost always empty. Her burdens have names. Rent, a week overdue. Electric bill with a red notice stamped across the top. And the most terrifying of all, letters from Mount Sinai Hospital, where her mother is being treated. The numbers in those letters are obscene, an insult to the meager paycheck she brings home. But the heaviest burden doesn't come in the mail. It lives in memory. The memory of her husband. Mateo still haunts this apartment. He was a gifted carpenter with calloused hands and eyes full of dreams. He dreamed of opening his own shop, Morales and Daughters Fine Woodworking. He worked double shifts, took out loans, believed in a future. That dream ended on a construction site when a scaffold gave way. The fall was fatal. His death didn't just leave a void. It left a debt, a number, and debt collectors who didn't believe in grief. After the funeral, while sorting through his things, Elena found a small notebook. Inside were sketches, a cradle for Luna, a rocking chair for Sophia, and on the last page, in his careful handwriting, he had written, "To Elena, the love of my life. No matter what happens, teach our girls that dignity is the rarest kind of wood. No rot can touch it." That sentence became her gospel. Dignity. It's the one thing she still owns. The one inheritance she can pass down to her daughters in a world hungry to sell everything. Each morning, she takes the Q47 bus, a 90-minute journey across invisible borders, a temporary migration between 2 planets. She always chooses a window seat. From Jackson Heights, where life spills out of colorful storefronts in every language imaginable, to Manhattan, where the landscape abruptly transforms. Brick and vinyl give way to glass and steel, grit replaced with gleam. She doesn't envy it. Envy is a luxury she can't afford. What she feels is something else. A quiet, bone-deep fatigue. A distance that grows wider the closer she gets. The Blackwood estate on the Upper East Side is another universe. It has its own gravity, its own atmosphere. And she is nothing but an invisible astronaut in a gray uniform, drifting in and out of lives she doesn't belong to. For 7 months now, she has worked in this house. And in those months, she has learned to sense him, Damian Blackwood. He rarely speaks to her, issuing brief instructions through the butler, but still she feels his presence. Sometimes as she polishes the floor, she's struck by the strange certainty that someone is watching her from somewhere just beyond sight. When they pass in the Pai hall, there's barely a nod. His cold gray eyes look through her, not at her, as if she's just another object to be dusted and kept in place. His distrust clings to the walls like a scent, not the strictness of past employers. No, this is deeper, structural, engineered. So she works like a shadow, not a speck, of dust on the bookshelf. Not a single unnecessary sound when shifting furniture. She must be precise, invisible. That's the only way to keep this job. The only lifeline tethering her family to the edge of survival. Last night, a new letter arrived. This one wasn't about bills, it was about time. Her mother's current chemo is no longer effective. There's a new immunotherapy treatment, more promising, less damaging, but not covered by insurance. The cost? Astronomical, unreachable, lunar. That night, after the girls fell asleep, Elena sat in the dark, staring at the letter, its words pressing down on her chest like a weight too heavy to breathe beneath. This morning, as she pushes the cleaning cart through the vast marble hallway, her arms feel heavier than usual. The quiet of the estate feels louder, denser. She stops outside Mr. Blackwood's study, her least favorite room. It's not like the others. There's no warmth, no softness, only command, precision, and power. She inhales deeply, a ritual she's learned to calm herself, to remind herself, this is just a job, 90 more minutes. Then she'll board the bus, return to her world, to the two little girls waiting for her. She places her hand on the oak door, pushes it gently, and instantly she knows something's wrong. A subtle fracture in the room's exact order, an unnatural stillness within the silence. The heavy oak door glided inward without a sound, and Elena Morales' world came to a halt. She froze in the doorway, her body rigid. The soft cleaning rag slipped from her hand and landed on the marble floor with a barely audible thump, a sound so slight yet piercing in the absolute stillness, it might as well have been a gunshot. Her eyes locked on the sight before her. The safe. Wide open. The air in the room seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. Her first instinct wasn't greed nor curiosity. It was a cold, primal fear, a trap. The thought cut through her mind like a shard of glass. This was a trap, and she had just walked into it. Images of past employers flashed through her memory. People always looking for an excuse to accuse, to deduct wages, to humiliate. She would be blamed for anything missing, whether she had touched it or not. Then came another image. Her two little girls, alone, motherless. And her heart clenched with invisible hands. Instinct screamed at her to step back, to shut the door, pretend she'd seen nothing. Run from the room, from the mansion, from this snare snapping shut. But her feet refused to move, frozen to the cold marble. A strange pull, a mix of disbelief and dazed awareness held her in place. She glanced down the hallway, empty, only the yaw. Ticking of the old grandfather clock dared to measure the seconds slipping through her life. Then, like a sleepwalker, she moved forward, each step slow, heavy. Not like a thief approaching loot, but like a pilgrim nearing some terrible relic. She drew closer, close enough to smell fresh ink and crisp paper, close enough to see the chandelier's light shimmer across rough-cut diamonds, scattering tiny, icy rainbows. And as the fear ebbed, something else stirred, temptation. Not a flood, but a creeping tide. Not shaped by selfish desire for designer handbags or luxury vacations. Elena's temptation had a face, the weary face of her mother. A vivid image pierced her mind, as sharp as grief last week. Mount Sinai Hospital. A young doctor, eyes kind but powerless, had pointed at a chart and said, "The immunotherapy, Keytruda, could make a real difference, Ms. Morales. But I'm afraid it's not covered under your mother's insurance." "How much?" she had asked, her voice trembling. The number he gave wasn't a cost. It was a wall towering between her mother and the chance to live. And now, the answer to that number sat right in front of her, stacked high, within reach. Another image flashed Luna, her youngest, pressing her face against a toy store window, staring at a dollhouse she knew she'd never own. Sophia, the older one, quietly slipping a field trip notice into her backpack without asking for money, because she had already learned not to hope, just one stack. The thought slithered in like a venomous whisper. Just one. Maybe even half. No one would ever know. He's so rich, he'd never notice. He has too much. Her mother has too little time. It would change everything. It wasn't theft. It was rescue. It wasn't greed. It was survival. In his hidden security room, Damian Blackwood leaned forward, eyes unblinking, fixed on the monitor. He saw the torment in Elena's face, the tremble in her lips, and her hand, calloused from years of labor, stretching forward, inch by inch. "There it is," he whispered. A bitter, satisfied smile tugged at his mouth. Cold victory swelled in his chest. He had been right. His father had been right. The world worked just as they said, no exceptions. At last, Elena's fingers hovered just above the top stack of bills. So close she could almost feel the texture, the weight, the power of it, 1 centimeter more. But then, before she could touch it, another memory surged into her mind. Not dramatic, just a quiet Sunday afternoon years ago, her husband, Matteo, teaching Sophia how to carve a little wooden bird. He had said in that warm, steady voice, "You see, sweetheart, what matters isn't what you make, but how you make it. Be honest with the grain, respect your tools, and most of all, be proud of your work, no matter how small. Be proud of your work." Her life, messy, painful, impoverished, was her work. Her daughters were her masterpiece. Would she have them grow up proud of who she was? Or ashamed that their mother was a thief, no matter the reason? Would she teach them that dignity could be traded for convenience? Or that it was the one thing in life that could never be bought? She yanked her hand back, as if burned. A hot wave of shame flushed through her body, burning away her despair. She had nearly betrayed everything she believed in, everything Matteo had left her. She lifted her head. This time, she didn't look at the money. Her eyes swept the room until they landed on a worn leather spine on the bookshelf opposite. She didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct, a feeling she had lived with for 7 months. Her gaze pierced that book's binding as if she could see beyond it, beyond the marble walls, and into the soul of the man watching her. It wasn't defiant. It was deeply disappointed, a silent condemnation, louder than any accusation. "You made my pain your entertainment." Then, in a single, deliberate motion, ceremonial in its weight, Elena reached out and gripped the heavy steel door of the safe. She didn't close it gently. She slammed it. Lack! That sound, sharp, cold, final, like the swing of a blade, it echoed through the room, ricocheting off expensive surfaces, shattering the silence and slicing through the waiting. It wasn't the sound of metal. It was the sound of a nom d'ordre declaration. Dignity that could not be bought. Elena said nothing. She didn't look back at the safe. She bent, picked up the cleaning rag she had dropped, turned and resumed her work, calmly, with chilling precision, polishing the gleaming surfaces as if nothing had happened. In the surveillance room, Damian Blackwood collapsed into his chair. The smug smile on his lips had frozen into something else. Horror. That sea lack. It thundered in his ears, echoed in his chest, shook the very foundation of the world he had so carefully constructed. He no longer saw a maid. He saw a judge, one who had just passed sentence on the smallness of his own soul. The monitor before him blurred under a heat he hadn't felt in years. Tears, real ones, the kind he thought he had long forgotten how to make. That night, sleep did not come to Damian Blackwood. He sat alone in his study, but it no longer felt like a command center. It had become a courtroom, and he was the only one on trial. His laptop screen still glowed in the dim light, playing and replaying the security footage. An endless loop of judgment. He'd watched it no less than 100 times. He watched the moment Elena froze, the initial flash of fear in her eyes. He watched the brutal internal struggle play out on her face. A battle he had orchestrated. He watched her trembling hand reach out, then recoil as if burned. And he watched her look up, as though her eyes could pierce the walls, the cameras, and see straight through to his soul. But it was the sound that haunted him. That sharp, final sea-lack of the vault door slamming shut. Each time he heard it, Damian flinched. That sound wasn't just metal on metal. It was the sound of a worldview collapsing. It was the sound of the marble walls he had so carefully built around his heart beginning to crack. His father's words, Everyone has a price. The toxic mantra that shaped who he was now rang hollow. That woman, the one he had dismissed, reduced to an object in his experiment, had proved him wrong. Absolutely, devastatingly wrong. For the first time in years, maybe since that stormy night in the Hamptons, Damien felt something beyond emptiness or rage. He felt shame, a deep, blistering shame that rose from his gut and tightened around his throat. He hadn't just misjudged her, he had behaved disgracefully, using his wealth and power to trample the dignity of someone already struggling, all to satisfy his sick need to be right. The monster wasn't the person who could be bought. The monster was the man who set the trap. Morning came. A gray light washed over Manhattan, but the darkness inside Damien remained untouched. He knew he had to do something, make it right. But how? Money, his ultimate tool, felt like an insult now. A check wouldn't erase what he'd done. It would only reduce her integrity to a transaction. Meanwhile, in Queens, Elena Morales hadn't slept either. She sat by the window, watching the streets, slowly wake. The fury from the day before had ebbed. What remained was a quiet sorrow and an unshakable resolve. She couldn't keep working there. She couldn't walk into a house every day where her poverty was seen as an invitation to be tested. This wasn't about pride, it was about protecting her soul. That morning, she didn't make breakfast for her daughters. She asked the kind neighbor next door to watch them, and her mother, for a while. Then she pulled out her gray uniform. She didn't throw it away in anger. She washed it, pressed it with her old iron, until every crease was smooth, then folded it carefully, ceremoniously, like a soldier returning a uniform after completing her service. It wasn't an act of surrender. It was a reclaiming of self. She wrote a short resignation letter, just one. Line, I, Elena Morales, hereby resign effective today. No explanations. His actions weren't worth the dignity of a justification. Damien was waiting for her. Not in the office, not in the drawing room. He stood in the kitchen, the one space that belonged to the staff, a room he rarely entered. He wanted to meet her on more neutral ground, if such a place existed in this house. He looked exhausted, unshaven. His expensive suit hung loose on him. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, who had seen something that shattered his reflection. When Elena walked in through the back door, silence filled the room. She didn't look surprised to see him. Calmly, she walked to the stainless steel counter, placed the folded uniform and the letter on top. They sat there, quiet accusations that needed no voice. Mr. Blackwood, I'm resigning, she said. Her voice was steady, clear, unshaken. Damien looked at her face, and for the first time he truly saw her. Not through a lens, not as another fixture in his home. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the exhaustion in her gaze. But more than anything, he saw the unyielding calm of a person who had already won the only battle that mattered. Because of what happened yesterday? He asked, voice raw. Elena met his eyes. This time she didn't look away. There was no fear there, no hatred, only truth. No, she said. Not because you left the vault open, but because you stood in the shadows, waiting to see what I would do. She drew a breath. Each word that followed was chosen carefully, razor sharp. You weren't testing my honesty, Mr. Blackwood. You were waiting for me to fail. That's not the same thing. You used my desperation as a litmus test for your beliefs about human nature. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. My poverty is not a moral flaw for you to experiment on. It's my life. It's the war I fight every single day, and you, her eyes locked onto his, you turned it into your own little play. Each sentence struck like a hammer blow, widening the cracks in his polished marble self-image. Damien was undone. He wanted to speak, to explain. But every word died in his throat. All the negotiation skills, all the sharp rhetoric that had built his empire, useless now. I'm sorry, he stammered. The words felt foreign, clumsy on his tongue. I was wrong. I'll make it up to you. Whatever it takes. That was his mistake. he turned to the only thing he still knew: money. Elena shook her head. A faint, sad smile crossed her lips. Not one of forgiveness, but of pity. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said softly. "My dignity isn't for sale, Mr. Blackwood, and my trust can't be bought back. Have a good day." She turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed on the cold marble floor. Deliberate. Final. Damien wanted to call out. Say something. But there was nothing left to say. He stood there, frozen, watching the proud line of her back retreat into the distance. The back door clicked shut behind her. Click. That sound, so gentle, echoed louder than the vault slam the day before. And Damien Blackwood was alone again. Alone in the vast silence of his estate. For the first time, his wealth made him feel poor. For the first time, his fortress had become a prison. He had won every business battle. But today, he had lost the one that truly mattered. And this time, no amount of money could buy the victory back. Elena Morales' departure didn't leave a visible void in the operations of the estate. Her position was quickly filled. The dust was still wiped, the floors polished, and the lilies replaced every day. But to Damien Blackwood, the house had never felt more empty or more cold. The silence, once a symbol of power and order, had become a constant indictment. Change did not come to him in a blinding moment of epiphany. It came like a dull ache, like a lingering illness. It began with small, almost unconscious actions. On the first day after Elena left, Damien called in a crew of contractors. But he didn't ask them to renovate or upgrade. He told them to dismantle the safe in his study. The workers were puzzled, but followed his orders. The sound of drilling and chiseling echoed through the mansion all day, like a painful surgery being performed at the heart of the fortress. When the work was done, what was once a symbol of impenetrability was now just a bare wall, an ugly scar on the mahogany panels. But Damien, staring at it, felt a strange sense of relief. In the days that followed, he wandered the house like a ghost. He didn't go to the office. He didn't return calls. Room to room, he drifted, staring at the objects he had spent a lifetime acquiring. For the first time, he saw not their value, but their weight. One restless afternoon, driven by an urge he couldn't quite explain, Damien did something he hadn't done in over 20 years, not since the day his father died. He descended into the basement to a part of the house that had long been sealed off, Victor Blackwood's old office. The air was thick with dust and the past. Everything was still in place. The heavy oak desk, the leather-bound ledgers, a crystal ashtray with a faint trace of burnt tobacco. On the opposite wall, an oil portrait of Victor looked down at him. In the painting, Victor wore a sharp power suit, his eyes piercing, his nearly imperceptible smile radiating absolute self-satisfaction. Damien had always seen that painting as a goal, a giant he had to outgrow. But today, staring into those painted eyes, he didn't see a god. He saw a frightened man. A man who had built an empire on distrust. A man who had turned the world into a battlefield just to feel safe. And in that moment, Damien realized he had inherited more than his father's fortune. He had inherited his fears, his suspicions, and his loneliness. He hadn't lived his own life. He had lived Victor's. Standing there in the cold silence, Damien knew one thing: an apology wouldn't be enough. Redemption couldn't be a single act. It had to be a process. And that process couldn't begin with a phone call to Elena. That would only be another intrusion into her life, another attempt to soothe his own conscience with wealth and influence. True, redemption had to begin with understanding. The next day, Damien contacted the director of one of New York's top private investigation firms. Ironic, really. He was now using the very tools of suspicion for a purpose entirely different. "I want you to look into someone," he said over the phone, his voice calm but with a quiet urgency. "Her name is Elena Morales, lives in Queens. But there's a condition. This isn't an investigation. It's a learning process. I don't want surveillance. I don't want hidden cameras or wiretaps. I want to know what burdens she carries. Her mother's condition at Mount Sinai, her kids' school situations, the debts she's dealing with. Do it as discreetly and respectfully as possible. I want to understand, not to interfere." The director, a grizzled former NYPD detective, was taken aback by the unusual request, but he agreed. Over the following week, a file began to form on Damien's desk. It contained no profit projections or acquisition targets. Instead, it held copies of medical bills, email threads between Elena and school administrators asking for tuition extensions, and debt collection notices. Every page cut deeper into Damien's conscience. He read about the immunotherapy drug Keytruda, its staggering cost, its chances of success. He read about Sophia, Elena's oldest daughter, qualifying for a gifted program at a public school, but unable to enroll because of a small unpaid fee. His shame began to transform into something else: purpose. Damien knew that simply paying off these debts wouldn't fix anything. That would just be another top-down gesture from a rich man, another act that robbed Elena of her agency. He needed a different plan. He, a business strategist who had spent a lifetime analyzing markets and acquiring companies, now devoted his intellect and precision to something entirely new. He spent days in research. He didn't call his bankers or corporate attorneys. Instead, he spoke with the director of the Robin Hood Foundation, a nonprofit focused on fighting poverty in New York. He consulted with a healthcare rights attorney about negotiating with pharmaceutical companies and hospitals. He looked into housing assistance programs and educational trusts. He didn't want to gift her a house. He wanted to build a path that she could walk on her own, one she could reach with dignity and pride. One evening, after days of sleepless work, Damien sat in his study. On his desk wasn't a business plan, but a complex roadmap. On one side were Elena's challenges, Isabella's treatment costs, Sophia and Luna's school tuition, Mateo's student loan debt. On the other were potential solutions: a prepaid private insurance package, an anonymously established education trust, a negotiated buyout of debt at a discounted rate. He was no longer using his resources to accumulate, but to construct. Not to fix the past, but to shape a different future. Not only for Elena, but for himself. The road to redemption isn't a straight line. It winds, it falters, it demands more than just remorse, it demands transformation. But for the first time in Damien Blackwood's life, he was walking a path of his own choosing, not one mapped out by his father. And though that road was steep and uncertain, it was the only one that led toward the light. A week after leaving the Blackwood estate, Elena Morales received a letter. It didn't come from a lavish Upper East Side address. It arrived from a prestigious law firm in Midtown Manhattan, sealed with wax and formality. Her heart raced as she opened it, fearing it might be some kind of legal maneuver. But what lay inside was entirely unexpected. It was an invitation, a formal request to visit their office to discuss a professional collaboration. No further details were given, except a note assuring her that her time would be fairly compensated. Curious but cautious, Elena spent a sleepless night wrestling with the decision. By morning, she had made up her mind. She would go. She would not let fear govern her. Wearing her best outfit, a crisp white blouse and plain black slacks, clean though modest, she boarded the subway downtown. The law office occupied the 40th floor of a glass skyscraper overlooking Central Park. Elena felt out of place, but she held her head high. A young attorney named Ms. Davis greeted her and led her into a large conference room. Damien Blackwood was already there, but he wasn't seated at the head of the table. He sat off to the side, near the window, more like a guest than a host. When Elena entered, he stood, a small but unmistakable gesture of respect. He looked different. The tension and fatigue were still there, but the cold arrogance had vanished. In its place was something more fragile, almost uncertain. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Morales," he said. His voice was softer now, no longer commanding. Elena nodded and sat down, maintaining a deliberate distance. Ms. Davis, seated at the head of the table, began the meeting. "Ms. Morales," she began in a professional, but not impersonal tone, We've asked you here today to present a proposal on behalf of my client, Mr. Blackwood. Please know, this is not a charitable offer. She slid a carefully bound packet of documents across the table. Mr. Blackwood intends to establish a new charitable foundation. Its mission is to provide comprehensive support, housing, healthcare, and education to struggling single-parent families in New York. Families like those who just need a real chance to stand on their own. Elena glanced at the packet, then up at Damien, her eyes filled with wary skepticism. Ms. Davis continued, "The foundation will be fully funded by Mr. Blackwood. However, he believes he is not the right person to lead it. The role requires someone with empathy, with lived experience, and most of all, with unwavering integrity." She paused, looking Elena directly in the eye. "Ms. Morales, Mr. Blackwood would like to offer you the position of founding executive director. If you accept, the foundation will be named the Morales Hope Foundation." Elena was stunned. It felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her feet. She looked from the lawyer to Damien. Was this another elaborate manipulation? A subtle bribe cloaked in altruism? As if reading her thoughts, Damien finally spoke. His voice was low and hesitant. "Elena, Ms. Morales, I know how this must sound. I know I can't undo what I did. That offense will always stand. But over the past few days, I've come to realize my wealth is worthless if it's only used to build walls. I want to use it to build bridges." He met her gaze, and this time there was no trace of deceit. Only weary sincerity. "I can't buy your forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I can try to become a better man. And I can't do that alone. This foundation needs you, your moral compass, your resilience. This isn't a job I'm offering. It's a partnership I'm asking for." He slid another set of documents toward her. "This is the detailed proposal. Your salary will be determined by an independent board, in line with nonprofit industry standards. You'll have full autonomy in operations. I'll remain a silent donor with no say in day-to-day decisions." Elena sat in silence for a long time, her heart pounding. She flipped through the documents. She saw strategic plans, budgets, legal clauses. This wasn't a half-formed idea. It was meticulous, structured, and most importantly, it gave her power. She looked up. Their exchange was no longer between employer and former housekeeper. It was now between equals. "Why name it the Morales Hope Foundation?" she asked, her voice still edged. "Why not something anonymous?" Damien drew in a breath. "Because atonement cannot happen in the shadows. Your name is a reminder. To the world, it will symbolize hope and dignity. To me," he said, his voice softening, "it's a daily reminder of my failure and of the woman who taught me a lesson my father never could." Our story ends here, in a conference room of glass and steel, suspended high above the New York skyline. It doesn't end with a hug or a tearful reconciliation. It ends with Elena Morales, eyes focused, lips pressed in thought, studying the proposal before her. No longer defensive, she was now weighing the decision of a leader. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no, and Damien Blackwood, a man once obsessed with control, sat across from her, waiting patiently. He had handed her the power to choose, and in that gesture, he found his first glimpse of redemption, because forgiveness is not always a destination. Sometimes it is simply the act of giving someone else the strength to write the next chapter. And the greatest lesson isn't about who was right or wrong. It lies in a person's ability to look at the cracks in their own marble walls, and instead of patching them, choose to use those broken pieces to build a bridge of respect.
Thank you for listening to today's story. If something in it touched you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or simply send this video to someone who might need a little gentle light in the middle of life's storms.